Oh, they're so nice. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order at 5:05. We welcome everyone here. The governing board encourages public discussion of all agenda items. Anyone wishing to address the board may submit a comment form prior to the start of the agenda item discussion. Comment forms will not be accepted for any items once the item has been announced. A person wishing to address the board shall first be recognized by the president and shall then proceed to comment as briefly as the subject permits. There's a 3-minute maximum speaking time per person on a single agenda item. The limit on discussing each item is 20 minutes. Board bylaw 9323 states the board cannot comment on a non-agenda item. However, the matter may be placed on the agenda of a subsequent meeting for action or discussion by the board per the Brown Act. Please be advised the board meeting is being recorded. We will be leaving for closed session, and the items to be discussed in the closed session are item 2.1, public employee appointment pursuant to Government Code 54947. Item 2.2, public employee discipline dismissal release pursuant to Government Code 54947. Item 2.3, conference with labor negotiator pursuant to Government Code 54957.9. Negotiator Molly Barnes, employee organization Sunol AFT Chapter 1494, local, CSEA Chapter 862, and management classified employees. Item 2.4, public employee performance evaluation by the superintendent. And we have any public comment on the closed session items? All right, we'll go ahead and close for closed session. We will go ahead and open our public session at 6:04 p.m. January 10th, 2023. In the closed session, the board approved the following personnel items. 1, child care staff, 0.75 FTE. All right. And we will begin our opening ceremony, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You have that. Oh, I found it. Perfect. Welcome to our meeting. It's good to have you here. Special welcome to our presenters. We've got Mr. Hamilton and I believe Mr. Isom. Maybe he's on his way. All right. Hopefully he can make it and is not flooded out. Thank you all for coming. The governing board encourages public discussion of all agenda items. Anyone wishing to address the board may submit a comment form prior to the start of the agenda item discussion. Comment forms will not be accepted for any items once the item has been announced. A person wishing to address the board shall first be recognized by the president and shall then proceed up here to comment as briefly as the subject permits. There is a 3-minute maximum speaking time per person on a single agenda item. The limit on discussing each item is 20 minutes. Board bylaw 9323 states the board cannot comment on a non-agenda item. However, the matter may be placed on the agenda of a subsequent meeting for action or discussion by the bond per the Brown Act. And please be advised, our board meeting is recorded and discussion will only happen from the presenter, the board, or those who are recognized up here at the podium, not from the audience. So thank you for respecting that and respecting our meeting. Let's see. First item is approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second the motion.
Second.
Great. And all in favor or any discussion? No. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Great. Annual audit report. Sunol Glen Unified School District 21-22 audit report conducted by E. Bailey LLP.
So they did not send a presenter tonight, so the board has received that information. And we do have our fabulous county CBO here, our acting CBO for us here. And so I didn't know, Tara, if you wanted to share any highlights. I know there was some questions about the finding, and so that might be good to talk about that piece that we had talked about.
Oh, okay. I thought that Shulkin was going to be here.
So did we. Yes.
To,
present.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to come up here?
Sure.
I know that's more fun. You don't like to sit in the audience. Sorry. You guys have to come up to the podium.
Surprise.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
So one of our board members questions, so he can address you that question. Unless you want to share.
Yeah, you can whatever question, I'll try to answer them to the best of my abilities. Yes, we every year every school district has an annual audit, which is mandated by California state law, and our auditors, IBADI, they do a huge assessment of all of our financials, our state compliance, federal compliance, our financial statements from top to bottom, accounts payable, accounts receivable. They look at all of our accounts, and then they give us an opinion on our financials. So just in my review, we have a favorable audit opinion. And I don't know if there were any questions that the board may have.
Yeah. So I was wondering if you could talk to, there were identified deficiencies in internal control and there were material weaknesses found. Can you talk about how those happened and how they're being, or how they will be addressed going forward so that they don't happen again?
Yes, okay. I'm going to.
So for example, on page 68 of the report, they talk about the identified deficiency in internal control.
Yes.
On page 75, they talked about material weaknesses, and then footnote 15 of the financials also talks about.
Yes. Okay. For those, just to reiterate what internal control is. Internal control is like a process or procedure that's set in place to, prevent fraud or to prevent misinterpretation of financial statements. An example could be before an expenditure is paid for, the check must be signed by 1 or 2 people. So that's an example of an internal control. It's to prevent, some kind of misappropriation of funds that are happening. So this audit report covers fiscal year 21-22. Because right now we're in 22-23. That won't be audited until the end of the year. So last year, it looks like there was, just go to the report here. There needed to be a restatement of some funds due to, I guess you could say, maybe some miscommunication or within our student body funds. So right now, Sunol, we record our activity in our student body funds in Fund 1. We've always recorded those funds in Fund 1. But in the preparation of the report last year, fiscal year 21-22, there was some miscommunication into how those funds were actually recorded. And so it was like a clerical error. And there was a clerical error, but this year, going forward, that has been rectified because now auditors know that our ASC funds are recorded in Fund 1. And we also did a review of our current year audit report to make sure that our, that our auditors know that management is reviewing the report and that this has been rectified and it will not happen in the future. And then there was a similar finding, another one related to, and also related to internal controls, where there had to be another reinstatement of some funds. And again, this will not happen again in the future because we have identified it. And we just need to review more of our financials before the report is actually submitted and communicated. And we've had a change of staff, so we're on the right track now. We've done things to rectify the differences and the findings.
Thank you.
And yes, we had no findings related to state compliance or federal compliance. So that's good. And that's all I have.
Yeah, the process, as Tara was saying, is really thorough. They a real compliment to our staff. They work with Cindy Grant because there's our revenue is generated by attendance. So there's a piece that she gets, her records get audited. Nikki Whitfield does all of our personnel documents. So she works with the auditors, and the county is as our acting CBO. So they do a huge piece of it working with them. And the auditors are very thorough. You can see the documents pretty in depth, and they do ask for a lot of documentation to back up what's happening. And the idea is to make sure that everything is following the rules and the laws and the regulations as set forth by those laws. So it's something that we have every year. We have the unaudited actuals that we accept in September. The audit occurs right thereafter. And then we get the final audit report for the previous year in January, sort of the timeline of that.
And it sounds like from what you were saying, staff turnover at the county, that there may have been, like a better way to describe it, things that were missed or miscommunicated or lost in translation as things changed. And now that that's fixed, that should prevent it from happening on a go-forward basis, which is fine. And that's what I think all we care about is that it's not repeated. That's all.
Right. Yes. Most definitely. And yes, that is not repeated. I know one of my jobs is to, to make sure that audit findings aren't repeated. So I just, help to either, tighten up procedures or work with Superintendent Barnes and staff to make sure that we just continue on the right track for no findings or no internal controls. Right.
But don't we have the benefit that you were previously an auditor?
Well, yes. yes. So I always try to put on my auditor hat as well.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you stepping up again because we assumed they were coming. I know the storms, they never communicated that they weren't coming. So thank you for stepping in without any warning. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Up to the podium.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tara. We have no public comment on that item. Number 7, board and staff reports and communication. We'll start with 7A, enrollment report.
So enrollment report, we're just clicking along and holding steady. It's been 270, I think, the predominance of the year. So we're still at 270, which is great because sometimes we do have kids move away. So having it hold steady is really nice.
Great. And that kind of goes into 7B, flood damage report. We're hoping to have the kids back. They're back Monday and Tuesday. So.
I just have to give a huge shout out to everybody. Our staff, the community, the board, just so many people, neighbors coming down here and helping us with dealing with the flood has just been, it's been humbling. It's been humbling to see. So just kind of giving some update on December, we did receive no notice that the creek was going to flood. And I was sharing with some folks that in 2015 during El Nino, we were given a lot of warning and we had meetings with all the agencies, SFPUC, Zone 7, Supervisor Haggerty, Caltrans. We had meetings with this saying it's, there's all these rains coming and what are you agencies doing to protect the school? And there was no types of conversations like that with this one. The school was actually closed for our annual winter holiday, winter break. And so nobody was here either. And all of a sudden, from my perspective, I got a call from the Romos and the Boberts on New Year's Eve. And I was watching this torrential rain was happening. So I was aware of that, but then to find out that the school was actually flooded, it's really shocking. It's just like, wait, what? No one warned us. And so really a big shout out. I had to write it down because there's so many people. First and foremost, Lowell Hoxie. Oh my gosh. Out there in Utah, we're like, whoa, come back. Mickey Whitfield, her son Paul Whitfield, a big thank you to Ted and Denise Romo. They came down on New Year's Eve and took photos, videos that were in constant communication with me. And that's what we were already working on this. I contacted, because I got those videos, I sent them to the county that night. And I sent them to the county of Office of Education on New Year's Eve thinking, they're all closed or whatever. And the new county superintendent, she hadn't even been sworn in yet. She called me on New Year's Day, Sunday, and said, I can't believe this, Molly, what can I do? And so she then alerted the county folks that would then, I had a meeting with Tara and Shireen and different people on Monday. So things happened really quickly because of the quick communication. So Chris and Kristen Boberts, they were just amazing. Chris Boberts, you with your sandbag feeling is just, again, amazing.
I just have to say one thing about that. Overstuffing sandbags, according to Mr. Oxby, is a problem that you need to work with.
I've gotten it figured out because now that I've thrown some, I'm like, no.
Okay, well, nobody told me that when I was like, I can lift those up. And I'm like, okay. And now I know who to blame. Those were heavy. Those were heavy sandbags. Also, thank you to Scott Peterson, a parent here who used to be a student here. He helped by bringing his Bobcat down. I think they were here on Wednesday. So again, you think the storm had the damage happened Saturday night. Really, I was out here on Sunday doing an assessment and calling everybody and stuff. And then Monday, the county folks were contacting me, this CD, California Department of Education. And we were already, the board was amazing too, because I asked each of them, since they're elected officials, to reach out to the elected officials. And all three of you guys were amazing in reaching out to people and getting their shining the light on what was happening to our sweet little school. Also, Clayton Copeman, he was down here helping with the Bobcat and moving of the containers. So the containers had to move into a higher ground because what happened, the water was so deep and so fast that it actually lifted the containers and they were floating around and banging into stuff. They were banging into our main building, this wing of the building, and also our slide, our big kids green play area, doing a lot of damage to the play area and potential damage to the school. Another shout out to the Alameda County Sheriff's Department. So they were worried about the school. I don't know if they got a call or they just were happened to drive by.
They were here on New
Year's Eve.
Yeah.
I know. And so they actually opened the gate, mystery to us, woo, touched their gate. It was them. But bless their hearts. And they drove. So the next morning too, there was these tire tracks. Who was there doing donuts or whatever? Tire tracks out here. And these two wonderful sheriffs came out and were, muscling out these containers because one of the containers was covering one of the drainage pipes. And so that was their worry. So they tried to really move those over to allow for more drainage. So just amazing folks just came out. Again, thank you to Ted Romo, Ryan Jurgensen, Linda Hurley. You guys have been wonderful and in good constant communication and trying to reach out for support as well. And to the community, so many community members have reached out asking how they can help. We feel bad because we're telling them, hold on. And they're just anxious to come in here and help. And I keep saying, oh, we'll get you. We'll get you to come and help. Don't worry. That stuff is going to happen and it's in the process. Cheryl Thompson, a big thank you, worked with the community club to get the GoFundMe page set up. It's humbling. I know. And that came up really quick. The way that you worded it and added the picture. So I always feel like a picture really tells the story. So that was beautiful how you set that up. And people are just amazingly generous. They set a goal of 5,000. I think it was reached within 24 hours. They reset the goal to 15,000, which was reached Sunday, January 8th. And we currently have over 18,000 because some people don't like GoFundMe, so they've dropped off checks directly. By the way, the police department, that group, that organization they dropped off a check for $500. They came on Friday, I think, and dropped off a check for $500. And all those funds I've always had the community club work directly with the teachers. And so what we've asked is for those, you can see now, this is my art teacher's room. So the art teacher was in the portable and the library now is not going to be able to be used because this just got set up today. So this is her art room. All the art supplies, furniture, everything is pretty much destroyed. And same thing with our childcare program and another classroom that held electives. So the books and the supplies in there have been severely damaged as well. So pretty much everything in those three portables, as well as the portables themselves, is significantly damaged. So we met with Supervisor David Hobart on Monday, January 9th. He was here he's amazing too. He was here Saturday on New Year's Eve and he took some amazing pictures watching the floods. I think that just shows how concerned he was for little community. But he came Monday, January 9th, yesterday at 10 a.m., 11 a.m. And I gave him a tour. He was pretty shocked at what, was kind of left. And he's offered to sponsor a flood recovery cleanup day at our school. So we're tentatively setting it. Everybody get your calendars up, February 4th from 9 to 4 p.m. He is so generous. He's willing to sponsor food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and work with agencies to help get equipment and other needs, wheelbarrows, maybe a wood chipper, some other things that we're going to do, bags to fill the debris, etc. And as I wrote my report in preparation for tonight, and then in the meantime, I'm continuing to get emails. And so I just want to also add that this morning I got an email from a parent that works with Tesla. And she said that Tesla is wanting to coordinate a group of volunteers to come out and help. I said, absolutely, great. February 4th, bring it on down, bring your Teslas on down. We also received an email from Assembly Member Lee. Oh, and did I write that in there? Assembly Member Lee came on Sunday with Mr. Romo. Mr. Romo was instrumental in reaching out to him. And he was just sworn into office on Saturday, and he showed up on it as Sunday. And I think Ms. Hurley, you also had reached out to him as well. So both of you, thank you. And we gave him a tour on Sunday. And so he also is really eager to help as much as he can. So I got an email from Assembly Member Lee, or text, I guess, and he had reached out to the Fremont Teachers Union, because the Fremont Teachers Union wanted to support our teachers here. So they want to make a donation. And I heard from them today. And I just got an email from a parent, Melissa Roth, who would like to partner with a foundation called Macy Grace Foundation. And they take on different projects and areas to donate every year. And they would like their donation this year to go to help with funds for play structures and repairs for our school. So, and I said, we'd be honored to accept that kind of help. So it's been overwhelming, just the amount of work and efforts that the community has put forth. I do have Mr. Architect Chad Hamilton here, and I thought this would be, is this okay? A spot. So I've had several meetings with Chad. We know that the 3 portables are, not habitable, and so but those programs need a house. They need a place to stay. Our art teacher needs a place. This is okay for a while, but we need something better. And our childcare program, I had to displace my kindergarten teacher, my K1 teacher. She's having to double up with another K1 teacher, which then freed her classroom up so that we had a space to offer our childcare program. Again, workable short-term, but we need to move into something a little bit more reasonable for our programs. And so Chad and I met last Friday, I believe. And then today at 11, we met with SFPUC, because Chad had this great idea, because this area is not workable right now, but what space do we have to put in some temporary portables? And one area that Chad came up with was a parking lot. Well, the school doesn't own the parking lot. The parking lot is actually owned by SFPUC. We have a great relationship with them. They let us use their property for our parking lot for years and years and years. So we reached out to them to get their permission to put out 2 temporary portables out into our parking lot, their land. And the meeting went really well today, and they had some stipulations about they wanted to make sure the portables aren't over their pipes or areas that they need to have access to. So I think we came up to a good solution. So take it away.
So yeah, this is just a very preliminary sketch. It's not based on a survey. It's based on me looking at Google Maps. I put this together over the weekend just to get the ball rolling with SFPUC. I'm going to talk a little bit later on the agenda about some of the processes that we all, as people who operate schools, need to adhere to. But what we're looking at here is implementing an emergency procedure that's allowed by the Division of the State Architects. So in order to make use of this procedure, we have to put relocatables on an existing durable surface like that parking lot, and we have to be out of the floodplain. So if you go on FEMA maps, or probably nowadays you can see it in the newspaper, there's a 100-year flood line that's just outside that parking lot area, and a 500-year flood that encroaches into it. It's okay to be in the 500-year floodplain, and probably we're going to need to do that unless we completely wipe out most of the parking. We're actually permitted to rent or buy relocatable classroom buildings and place them prior to DSA approval, which is unusual, but because it's an emergency, we can do that. And then within 60 days, we'll need to follow up with an application and a plan review. And so that we can actually get this done fairly quickly. But we do need, of course, to work it out with SFPUC. Any questions?
So again, not optimal, but better than what we currently have. And it will buy time for us to then place those programs in actual classrooms and not having them double up in either our library or other classrooms, and allow us to move forward with looking at a more permanent solution.
I did think of one. Are we planning to rent or lease them then?
Well, that's to be determined. These are ruined, really. You can already tell they're beginning into mold.
Right.
They, in my opinion, wouldn't be worth repairing.
Right.
We'll need to look at the cost of renting versus the cost of owning, and can they be used in a future permanent location. So and I'm sure we're going to be coming to the board with that information for a decision.
Thank you. This is, and again, Chad, thank you. This has happened within a week. So it's been fast moving, but we need to service our students, and we need to come up with a solution that allows us to have a good educational program for our students. So it's critical work. Thank you. I think that's it for that. Any other questions, board?
I just want to say that I appreciate the fact that you and Mickey and Cindy and so many others came in on basically holiday time and did it for free. Come in and help out and really take charge of this process and do the right thing. And not only does the board appreciate it, but the students appreciate it.
Thank you.
That was huge, definitely. Thank you. 7C is superintendent's report.
Well, that was it.
Continue right into it.
The flood
was that both?
Captured my attention. Yeah. One of the things that we're working on trying to capture the impact of the flood, and one of the recommendations we got is to track our time on the flood. So Mr. Hoxie's time, my time, Nikki's time, Cindy's time. And so everything, so over the holiday, over the winter break, it was like, 8 hours what we do flood stuff. It's like, that's all I'm doing. But no, now we're back in school. Oh, and that was also, I was in a meeting with several superintendents from other districts, the CD, the Small School Districts Association, executive director, the county superintendent, a bunch of other folks. And they said, oh, with the damage that we're seeing, you're not going to be able to just know you're probably not going to be able to open school January 9th. So I actually put out a letter to the staff that said, hey, I just want you to know we might have to pivot. And if we're going to be working really hard during this last week of the holiday to get the school ready to welcome students. But I just want you to be prepared. I don't want to tell you last minute to have lesson plans that have to be from home. And we, again, Mr. Hoxie, the team, we just worked really hard with the vision of, let's open school January 9th. And we made that happen. And I feel really proud. And those folks go, oh, we can't believe you did that. So I just feel really proud of us. And that's how dedicated we are to our students, because we know kids need to be in school. So yeah. And yesterday we had 95. Then it was nerve wracking. We were watching the creek, because now I'm not connected to the flooding, was the new storm. And so we were watching the creek really carefully. Mr. Hoxie has a video that he can actually watch to see where the level is. And just again, watching the storms and everything. And so we also have let people know that we're not going to put anybody in any unsafe situation. That's safety is the #1 priority. And if it did come to be Sunday night, Monday morning at 6 a.m., it looks like we need to close, then we're going to close, because I don't want to put anybody in an unsafe situation. But we kept watching, and it was close to making the call, but we decided, I think we're going to be okay. And we came, and we had 71% of our students come, which was great. I was thinking it wouldn't be quite as high, and I respect every parent that chose not to come, because it was nerve-wracking listening to the news. But 71% of our students came, and 95% of my staff showed up. So it was amazing. It was just, it just shows how resilient and dedicated people are. So really, really proud and humbled by all of this. My report, that's the main focus, but now going back to, it seems like pre-flood time, like, whoa. We did have some things to celebrate before our winter break. We did our amazing program, Sunol Gives Back. It was led by Renee Stillwell and Kay Wagner, and Cheryl has a big piece of it, where they do this whole program where they adopt 2 families, and we work with Viola Blythe. It's a center out in Newark, and they actually get a wish list from the children and from the parents, and it's very humbling. A lot of things they want are dish towels, socks, very humbling types of things. And it was the outpouring of support from the parents, the community was amazing. And then part of the program is we always ask the children to take turns wrapping the gifts, and that also is such a great giving to others. And so it's a really good thing. And that's a lot of fun to see them get excited about wrapping something to give to somebody. So that happened, and it went really, really well. We hadn't had it because COVID, that's now on the back burner, right? COVID, remember that COVID? Because of COVID, we haven't had our winter concerts for 2 years, and that's a beloved event. And so we decided that we wanted to have live concerts for the first time in 2 years, but gathering everybody in with closed windows in the auditorium, and that usually our shows would be packed, like people would be out in the halls and stuff. So we decided that it might be safer to try something different. And so we had little mini concerts that would pertain just to the children's class. So parents came to just see their child perform, and a lot of parents loved it, because they didn't have to fight for seats or stand in the hallway and miss it. And most parents really, not that they don't love the whole thing, but they
thumbs up.
You came. What did you think?
Oh, it was excellent, better than before.
Yeah.
So I hope you keep it.
Yeah, thank you. That's, you always want to like weigh out like what did we learn from this and what pieces we can keep. So the only feedback I had is maybe combined with 2 classes just to make it a little bit longer and it's fun. Then you could see the next year's class or the last year's class, but it was really great. Parents loved it. We had a lot of people attend. It was during the day, so we were worried about that, but people, they're dedicated to their children and they came. It was really cool. So we do plan on keeping it that way. But we are looking at ways to make it even better. So if you have any feedback for us, let us know. Kindness campaign, boy, there's been so much kindness going on, but we celebrate specifically kindness at all times, of course, but the big kindness campaign is February 6th through 10th. Working with Community Club, we want to do programs with kids about creating a ripple, do an act of kindness. We do sharing kindness quotes every day over the loudspeaker. The kids usually get a kindness bracelet. If there's not rain on the ground, we would do sidewalk chalk. I don't know. We don't have very much area for sidewalk chalk, and kindness purple rocks with messages. So it's a really great program and something to celebrate, and I'm looking forward to it. So that's coming up, and that's my report. So sorry, I know it was really long, but the flood stuff, but thank you very much.
Thank you. 7D, facilities and maintenance report from Mr. Hoxie.
I don't have much to talk about. I'm going to show you some pictures. You know the flood. I don't want to get into all the videos and stuff. I'm just going to show you some of the damage that we've done. We got leaks from the cafeteria. We have about 3 of them. Just click to the next one. And this is the one that's kind of baffling me. I don't know where the water's coming from. I've sealed the other 2. I got them covered up. This one's challenging. And that's the trouble with water leaks. You got to figure out where they're coming from. And I got to suspect, this one is probably where it's coming from, but we'll track it down and get that. That's the cafeteria. Of course, the tiles are falling because they get wet sometimes, and then it's all leaked also. Then they came in and they did moisture checks in the classrooms, to make sure water didn't get in the classroom and stuff. What they do, I'm just showing you the faceboard there, they pull it away. They drill a hole. Well, the samples they take to make sure there's no asbestos, make sure there's no lead. And they put the moisture meters on, because there's 2 layers in these walls. You got your outer layer and then you got an inner layer. Well, they go all the way through and check everything in the wall and make sure they're not wet. I think the next one, yeah, I just show a couple pictures. They went down this whole line back here and down the other side. Okay, the next one, this is a charming shot. We did pump the septic tanks, just because it did have a lot of sediment in it. So we hauled 2 loads out of the septic tanks, and they're clean and working now. This is the company RMC. They came in right away and they have a crew. We're moisture checking floors to see how much, you know, it had to be removed so we can make sure there's no mold growing. After that we started, they got the moisture. They take the bottom sheetrock out that was wet because tired of the sheetrock, it soaks up water. You can go next one. And it's funny because we did get into a couple of these rooms. We did find some mold in the wall, probably from a previously, you know, earlier or whatever. But this is our storage room. So to make sure, because they're what we're finding a little bit more, we went up a little higher on them. And that's closet storage, PE closet storage, and then my office is in the back there. Today we went through, they've got the sheetrock all out, they got the flooring out. They go back through and they keep moisture check. They've got humidifiers going, they got dryers in there right now. And if you could zoom in on that gauge right there, it says 999 on that gauge, which that's still wet. You see the little red dot there. When you hit it, you come up a little bit, or some of the other walls he's probing, it's down in the 150, which is normal. It's good. So there's still a few wet spots. They're drying them out, make sure everything's dry. When they get done with the drying and everything like that, then a hygienist will come in and do air samples to make sure there's no mold or anything. They encapsulate and seal everything before then we'll go ahead and put sheetrock or whatever back in.
Can I just stop? So this was critical, and I forgot this in my report. But I know there's some parents here, so I just want to reassure you that we on Monday, so January 2nd, Monday, we had Restoration Management Company come out here. And one of the things we told them is we want students to be safe and eligible to be here next Monday. And so do the things that need to happen first. And so they went into every single classroom and room and did the moisture survey. And none of the core classrooms had moisture in it, because that's always a huge concern. So but we did know that the flood had caused a leak or excuse me, water to enter into Mr. Hoxie's office, because it's right, his door is the only door actually over there, right where the water was raging. And so that's how the water got in there, and then the water seeped under and into those other offices. So the only damage besides the 3 portables were the PE office, the Mr. Hoxie's office, the storage room for PE, and the storage room for teachers' supply. So luckily those aren't rooms. Well, there are 2 human beings in 2 of the rooms, but they're not where kids are, and they're moving on it. They're, you know, wanting to be really careful to make sure that they do a good job, and we are watching for mold and anything. So
that was the last picture of it. Yeah. In the future, we're going to move the containers around this weekend. We're going to readjust them and everything. The county office had offered us a 40-foot container. And what we're going to do is try and make some space in here so we can slip it in and try and empty the auditorium, a lot of the stuff that's in there out. Because right now we can't use the auditorium. I mean, it's completely full of stuff. And then by that time, they'll start getting the offices back in and we slowly work our way back in and get these offices functioning again. So that's been a lot of work right now.
Thank you. Appreciate all the work you are doing. And
thank everybody too for all the help. I mean, that's really appreciated.
Yeah, it does take community. 7E, bond process. We appreciate Mr. Isom for coming down. We have a past bond, so if you can come up, share some thoughts with us, that would be great. And let us know of the next steps.
Yeah, well, congratulations on Measure J. What a significant win for the district, and also congratulations, board members, for winning your respective elections. I was just going to take a few minutes to talk about, next steps. And I'd like to kind of break it up into a few different categories, kind of some legal requirements that you have, some financial considerations, and then even political, for the benefit of the board and in the audience here. So by passing Measure J, when voters approve any bond measure, one of the first steps that goes into that is keeping your obligations under Prop 39. Now, Prop 39 was passed by voters back in 2000. Lowered the threshold from 67% supermajority to 55% with conditions. So they said, we'll make it easier to pass these measures, but we'll also put some taxpayer safeguards in place. One was you had to go in a regular election. You couldn't do a sneaky special election. Two is you had to stay under $60 tax rate. You couldn't just, ask whatever tax rate that you'd like. Three, you had to have a supermajority of the board approve the measure to put it on the ballot, whereas other measures you could use 3-2 or 4-3. And then the ones that are relevant to you guys here is a requirement to have a Citizens Bond Oversight Committee and annual performance and financial audits. Okay, so those are somewhat unique to you. This district passed the bond under the old rules, under Prop 46. Never had to do that before. Now you have some new things to abide by. Let me take the easier of the two, which is the performance and financial audits. Every year, the district is required to report to the community, both financially and performatively, on how you spent the money. Okay. It's typical now that usually a district's existing auditor says, you know, we provide that service as well. Sometimes someone gets a third party. I don't see any reason to do that. If you've got an existing auditor and they're competitive in price, they should have the expertise to do it. But their job is to simply, just like a financial audit, here's where all the dollars and cents went, and this is how they align, and this is how we square it up, and everything looks good. But there's also a performance component to that, which can be done either through a Citizens Bond Oversight Committee or sometimes through the auditor. And that is more one of, have you kept your commitments to voters as it relates to spending the dollars as promised? And I put that promise in quotes because it's not so much a promise as much as it is a disclosure, right? We said, here, voters, these are the projects that we are intending to do, and you have to stick to those, okay? Now, you're not obligated to complete projects on the list, but you're prohibited from doing projects that aren't on the list. So let's say you get into the 100-year-old building and all of a sudden, instead of it costing $3 million to renovate, it's $8 million, right? It's like, oh, the whole thing is full of all these horrible things. And you've run out of money, and the cafeteria, which has tremendous roof leak, et cetera, now is on the chopping block, right? Giving you kind of an extreme example. You're not compelled to do those projects at the cafeteria if you don't have the money to. But you can't go out and build a swimming pool because that wasn't disclosed. Okay, so that's the performance and financial components. The other more significant element as far as legal requirements under Prop 39 is the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. I want to take a minute there just to kind of remind you of what you approved when the election was called in the resolution there. Citizens Bond Oversight Committee 1 is comprised of 7 people, 5 of whom meet a specific criteria and 2 at large. So the 5 that meet a specific criteria, a parent in the district, a parent who's part of a PTA group in the district, someone that's representing the business community, someone that represents senior citizen community, and someone that's a member of a bona fide taxpayers organization. Okay, those are 5 boxes that we need to be able to check. Now, a senior citizen representative doesn't mean they have to be a senior citizen. They can be a younger person who happens to represent senior citizens with the AARP or whatever the group might be, okay? The 2 at large, again, can be at large. They are appointed by you, the board, and they cannot be staff or spouses of staff. So if you're thinking like, oh, maybe I can talk to my spouse into doing this, they can't participate in this, okay? Duties are pretty straightforward and simple. They're not to tell you how to spend the money. They're to inform the public if you are spending it correctly. Okay, so it's almost a post review, and I say almost because not only are they to report annually and meet at least annually, it's up to them how often they decide to meet. But their job is to say you didn't have any waste or fraud. So they could blow the whistle early if they did see waste or fraud in the middle of something that would be under their purview. But ultimately, it's to say there was no waste or fraud, and you spent money in accordance with the project list as committed to voters. Okay, hey, they were spending money on a swimming pool, shouldn't have done the swimming pool, right? That's their goal. So pretty straightforward. Usually it's a 2-year service term. The very first group that's convened usually will divide themselves up under a who's going to do 1-year service and who's going to do 2-year service. Sunol, Glen, smaller district, smaller pool to select from. There's not a hard, fast rule that everybody has to come from within the district boundaries. Especially sometimes the oversight committee member representing the taxpayer group is a tougher one to find. So it's not uncommon to say, hey, Pleasanton or Fremont or Livermore, we got an oversight committee person that you can lend to us if you can't find someone locally. So that's not a hard, fast rule, but I certainly think, politically the ideal would be to get local residents to participate. Let me take a pause on that because that's kind of the first element of legal requirements under Prop 39. Any questions that you guys have on that?
On the 60-day requirement to put that committee in place, the school district has basically a reasonable efforts obligation on finding those people and having them in place, or is it some other standard?
It's the former. It's a reasonable effort, and while I shouldn't say, hey, there's oversight committees out there that aren't comprised of 7 members, there are oversight committees that don't have the 7 members. All you can do is put it out there, right? You can put out a very simple, basic application. You can set a pretty low bar and encourage participation. You, the board, will ultimately appoint those members. Okay, so you can put it out there. You can do as much advertising as you want, and if you only get 50 people to participate, you should continue to make a good faith effort, but I would not stop from establishing your committee, even if it only has 4, 5, or 6 members. But then I would continually work to try to find that individual to round out the committee. And you can go bigger than 7, by the way, if somehow you have a really robust group, but I would say 7 is probably ideal for you guys. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward, pretty easy concept. Let's talk about the bond and the financing itself. So voters approved $10.9 million in bonds. That's an authorization. That is the not to exceed. That is not the one lump sum that you're going to be getting. We structured that specifically for 2 reasons: that you would get funds over time. And for simplicity's sake, let's just say it's 3 million, 3.5, and 3.5 million, maybe 4 million. But basically $3 to $3.5 million in 2023, in 2025, and in 2027. Now that works in an ideal world where your assessed value grows sufficiently, where interest rates are sufficient to support those issuances, but it is not a guarantee, okay? We are dependent upon our tax base on our assessed value, and we are dependent upon interest rates. We were conservative in our assumptions, so we think it's likely that we'll be able to hit those. Better safe than sorry. Maybe we left a little money on the table by being conservative. But we think we at least nearly guarantee our ability to access those dollars. Part of the reason for the 3 different issuances, and it may ultimately become 2 issuances, right, depending on what happens. One of the reasons is tax rate sensitivity to voters. Hey, we said you've been paying 52, we're not going to raise that tax rate. We want to just keep paying the 52 because it's going to expire next year, or 2024 July. So let's just keep paying the 52. So in order to get 10.9 million, part of the reason was you space it out over a little bit more time, you're able to get a little bit more money under the same tax rate. And the other is logistics. I know Mr. Hoxley works miracles over there, but your school is a single school. And to take $11 million on day 1 and basically say, kids, get out, and we're going to get everything done is a little bit of a logistical overreach. So for most school districts, they like to do this in phases. So that's easy. So I'm going to just talk about the first issuance because the other 2 are in the future and TBD. So what's going to happen to you is that you're going to have some legal documents brought before you that are going to establish the parameters of the finance. There's going to be one document in its final form, and that's called the resolution of issuance. And I say that because you're going to get a bunch of other documents that are not going to be in final form. They're going to be blanks in that document. So when you look at that and you say, well, this is incomplete. The reason it's incomplete is because it doesn't get finalized until the bond prices and closes. But what it does do is get us to about 95% accuracy. So when you adopt the perfect 100% resolution of issuance, you're also saying, and we're adopting these other documents in near final form, and then we're deputizing Molly and John and the lawyers and other people to go ahead and complete the financing on our behalf. And when you make that adoption of that resolution, you're also directing the county, you're going to have to levy taxes on our behalf. You're deputized to do that. county, you need to set up an account for me so I can draw from it. So when we deposit the $3 million, we've got a separate account. It's separate from everybody else, including your own general fund money. And ultimately, all of the parties that need to get things done on your behalf is approved in that singular resolution. Again, it's going to be a not to exceed dollar amount. I think $3 million is what we're looking at right now. Most districts, the first bond sale is kind of a, yeah, it's good seed money. We need to start spending money on the architects and approvals and DSA and this, that, and the other. But it's the second one that you really fine tune it. Because at that point in time, you've got approved documents, you've got maybe approved bids, you have a really good sense of how much things are going to cost because you spent the money to determine that. And then you say, all right, I need another $2.6 million or $3.7 million. And so that Series B is really important to try to be as accurate as we can. This one is let's stay within our tax rates and give you a big chunk of money to get started. But I don't think you guys have any real sense of just how much money you would need. So the idea is to lock in these low interest rates, still low by historical standards, by the way, and get you started so that 2 years from now, you'll have a really good idea of how much money you need. So that's establishing kind of the legal parameters. Real quickly, after that's done, there's what we call prepping the bonds for sale. And when we do that, we seek insurance and we also get a rating, credit score. And just like you have credit scores, everyone here has a credit score, and the better your credit score is, the cheaper it is for you to borrow money. Same is true for a school district. But the difference here is we get to make our case. We get to go to San Francisco and say, hey, rating analysts, let me tell you about this wonderful little community that you haven't heard much about called Sunol, Glen Unified. And let me brag about our residents. And let me brag about the quality of education. And let me brag about our finances and our good audits and everything else. And then those credit rating agencies will give you a letter grade, ironically. And if you get a good letter grade, it'll be easier to borrow money at a very low interest rate. I am really excited because it's very rare that we get to work with a district that hasn't done this in a long time. For you guys, it's been over 20 years. But I'm very confident that we're going to get a fantastic credit score with you guys. So we've looked at some of the preliminary stuff. I'm very familiar with the area, having grown up nearby. And so I think we're going to get a fantastic credit score. So when we get that credit score and possibly insurance, okay, insurance is simply a cost benefit analysis. By buying insurance, do I save more on interest rates? Or am I just putting money into something that's not going to benefit me with lower interest rates? That's the determination. Technically, they save the day if you don't make a bond payment. But in the history of California, there's never been a default on a GO bond. In the history of California, it's just the nature of why people love GO bonds, why they're so cheap, why interest rates are so low. It's because there is no default and the investors know that. So why do insurance? Because some investors are willing to pay a little extra for a lower interest rate if they know it's insured. But I don't know that we're going to need that here, but we'll do that. Lastly, once the bonds have been established with legal parameters and they've been prepped for sale with the rating and possible insurance, then there's the pricing itself. And that is a 2-day process where we're on a conference call with the underwriter, who's the bank that's out there to buy bonds on your behalf, and then basically line up investors to buy those bonds. And we negotiate on your behalf, again, as fiduciary, to make sure that you're getting the best rates. So the underwriter will say, hey, this is what I think we should sell these bonds for. And unlike a home mortgage or when we think of a borrowing, we sometimes think of like a single number, 4%, 3%, 3.8. Here we're going to have 25 unique bonds representing each year, 25 unique interest rates, and 25 unique ways of earning those interest rates based on the coupons. So there's 25 points of negotiation with the underwriter. So the underwriter will say, this is where we think it should be. And then we say, well, last week we priced a similar deal, also a AA, great credit, small bond, just like Sunol Glen, and we think it should be here, a little bit of haggle. We agree in preliminary, and then they take that out to the market and actually take orders, which you guys can all see if you want, boring, but you can still do it if you want to. And then those orders come in, and then there's a post pricing call where we have a discussion. They say, I sold all the bonds, and we'll say, okay, then lower the interest rates because that was too attractive. Or I didn't sell any of the bonds, or I sold half of the bonds, and we make price point adjustments accordingly. If at the conclusion of that call, the district is happy, we make a recommendation, we say, we think you should accept it, then the district would agree over the phone. And then all of a sudden bond counsel would go into a hyperdrive and put all of that information into those form documents that we talked about at the beginning to finalize the financing on your behalf. Takes about 2 weeks from pricing till money in the bank. At the timeline that we're looking at right about now, I think our expectation will be to have money in the bank for the district by late March, early April. So it's a pretty, I mean, it can be a fast process. It's a good steady pace. So hopefully, even with the backdrop of the flooding challenges that you guys have, hopefully we can kind of work that into your schedule. Because I do think that interest rates are likely to creep higher just based on the read from the feds, et cetera. So it'd be nice to be in a position to jump into the market while we can. So the very last thing I'm going to say, and I'm taking more time than I should have, but political, I can't tell you how important it is to keep the community informed. I would say spend a couple of bucks, your Measure J dollars at work. Here's a list of things that you're doing. Put it on a sign so when people walk by, they see it. Put it in the front office so when people come by, have the ribbon cutting ceremony. Thank the community for doing this on your behalf. This is massive. This is, game changing. This is generational when you think of really what you guys have done here and what the potential is. And, who's to say in the next 10, 15, or 20 years, you don't have to go back again and you want voters to say, you know what, that was a good thing that we did. And I appreciate the district for keeping me in the loop and patting me on the back. So that would be my last thing that I would mention as far as things to be mindful of. Done a lot. Any questions? Please.
Okay, I have this thing here and I'm wondering if this is your prospectus.
Well, that's just our contract.
Okay.
Yeah, that's our contract. The prospectus will be about 1 centimeter thick and it'll have everything you could possibly want to know about Sunol Glen Unified, about the bonds that are being offered specifically, and about the state of the state. So any investor who wants to say, what's going on in California? It's all in there. Okay. What's unique to this bond? It's all in here. Tell me about Sunol Glen, never heard of them? It's all in here. Board members, ADA, enrollment, audits, negotiations, not anything confidential, but public information related to that. Your assessed value, top taxpayers, your overlapping bonded debt, meaning how much debt does this district have compared to other communities. It's really, I think it's interesting. People are like, you have a boring life. But I think it is interesting to really get the nitty gritty and understand every little aspect about the community through the eyes of the bond investors.
So in reading this, I pulled out, it looked like the charge is $65,000. And I don't know if that's for each time we take a lump of money.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so one other person in the community thought that he heard you say that it was $65,000 for the whole bond, but you're saying no. Each time we take a...
Each time it starts the whole process over. So if it's 2 years from now, we start the whole process over. And so it would be the $65,000. She's speaking about RP specifically. And that's why I said too, while it's structured to have 3 issuances, we may end up with 2. Sometimes financially, you save a few bucks on RP, you save some money on bond counsel fee. If we can squeeze it into 2 and it works with your construction schedule, that's what we would want to do as well.
Okay, so the other thing that I know, and I reflecting things that come to me from the public. We have heard you say in the last meeting that you came that we would only pay for what we actually borrow. And so if we find that we don't need, because Governor Newsom gives us new portables or something of this nature, then we don't have to use that fund and it won't be. It won't.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we get that in writing on something?
It's just the law. I mean, you guys decide if we sell bonds, not me. All we do is bring a resolution and say, all right, here's the next sale. May I?
Go.
Okay.
Please.
I do think. Oh, of course I got
It's been flooded out.
Okay, I'm just going to show you because I think this is important. If I was a community member, to me, this would be, are you kidding me?
Oh.
Try green.
It
You
is?
can use the
Here,
Wait,
you got it.
green.
Oh, up here?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you would like.
No, that's fine. That's fine. This is going to be a super basic. Oh, this is cool. Okay. So this is a super basic debt service / tax rate chart. Okay. So let's just represent here. This is the tax rate, $52. And this is the year 2020. Well, we're going to say 2024 because we're not going to start collecting taxes until 2024, right? So even though we can get you money now, we do what's called accreting interest, and you're able to have an investor put some money up to make the payments that are due. So if, Linda, to your point, we sell bonds, and let's just make it, I'm going to keep it round numbers here, 2050. Oh, my penmanship is not great. 2050, let's just say 2055, it doesn't matter. So we sell the first series of bonds in 2024, and this all represents kind of debt service. And this will be 26 and 28. This is when the taxes will hit, okay, an individual. So here we sell these bonds at the $52 level until 2026. And then the way that these are structured is this drops down to like this. And then we're just going to take it out all the way to here. So this would be what the debt service, all the taxes represent, right? For Series A, $3 million.
So that dip, does that reflect what the person is going to be charged?
Yes. So let's just put this down at $26.
If you don't get the second round.
And I'll just say 44, just to pick a round number. And then we say, oh, still need a little bit of money. Newsom hasn't come through. No one won the lottery. No one gave us the money. And now I'm going to sell this next series of bonds that's going to cover these next few years. And it's going to go out like this. And this represents, Series B taxes. Okay. So far we're keeping our commitment to voters, 52, 52, 52, 52. And then, we don't need to sell any more bonds for whatever reason. So what happens is my tax rate goes down to, let's say $44. And then we're just paying off the Series A and B until 2052. If you do need the money, then fast forward to 2027, 28, and we sell the last bond that's going to look like that. And in a perfect world, again, assuming assessed value cooperates, in a perfect world, we have this nice level, $52 over this 30-year period.
And this is all modeled based on a conservative assessed value increase.
Yes.
And if assessed values go up more, then our rate goes lower.
Yeah.
The tax rate will go lower.
Look at his finger. Look at his finger
Yeah.
trick. Yeah. Then the tax rate.
Whoa.
Then the tax rate would decline over time, similar to what the old 1999 bond program did. Right? When voters approved that, it was a much higher tax rate, and it just kind of worked its way down to $52. So you would have something similar. Devil's advocate. If we don't grow, and all of a sudden we, have a Great Recession Part 2, then that tax rate could inch its way up over time. But we always try to err and be super conservative. In a community like this, you have so much latent assessed value, meaning people have lived here forever. Their homes are worth so much more on the market than they are as assessed value. So it's pretty rare for the established communities to actually see declines, right?
It's the new ones that are.
It's the communities that like Stockton that just built a ton of homes, and Lodi and built a ton of homes where their whole community actually saw negative growth during the Great Recession. Here, San Ramon Valley, Walnut Creek, always up, sometimes at a slower rate, but always up.
So what percentage ramp are you predicting?
3.5 or 4.
Okay.
I think 3.5 or 4%. Your historical over the period we were looking at was about 5. So we said, let's come in at 80% of it.
Great.
Can you just talk a little bit whether or not the credit rating will be impacted at all by the flooding and the damage this occurred?
I was actually asked that question by a reporter today from Forbes. I didn't respond. Not that I don't have the answer. I don't believe it will. And I'm going to borrow from credit rating analysts' concerns and questions over fires. We represent Paradise Unified. We represent almost all the districts in Shasta County. We represent a lot of districts in Sonoma County that went through those horrible fires, and Lake County. None of them saw a decrease in their rate because of the forest fires. While significant, you don't have near the damage that those folks have had. People ask about it. They wonder about flood insurance. They ask about fire insurance. They're concerned, but I don't see that being an issue, again, based on how they've treated the fire districts, what I call the fire districts.
And the other question I have is with respect to the bond document, the legal documents, how much with a 10.9 offering total, is there room to negotiate any of the terms, or is it really the underwriters just take it or leave it on the documentation?
Well, I mean, when you say the documentation, I mean, there's always room to negotiate on just about anything.
But practically speaking, I mean, it's a small bond offering. So how much should we expect that this is not going to be a negotiated deal in that sense?
Oh, I would expect it. I mean, there's one advantage you have with us is that we sell more bonds than anybody by a country mile. And that means we negotiate with more underwriters than anybody. And they know when it comes time to do like an RFP, they turn to us and say, oh, okay, yeah, whatever you say, please include me in the next RFP for that big bond issuance. So I would say that those underwriters probably go more so out of their way for us than others. So when we say you have to beat Pleasanton and their bond sale, or Walnut Creek and their bond sale, or whomever, we usually get our way.
But that's on pricing, but I'm talking about as well the rest of the documentation. Is that pretty much cookie cutter?
Oh yeah, the disclosure is pretty. I'm sorry, I apologize. The disclosure is cookie cutter. It's much of it's mandated by the SEC.
Sure.
Then the underwriters themselves have their long list of things that they need to disclose. I hate to say it, 10 years ago, it was 1 page of due diligence questions, and now it's up to like 4. So they keep asking about new things, like, do you have cybersecurity?
Yeah.
You know, that was no one talked about that. No one talked about fires, 6 years ago. So it's that part is cookie cutter. Yeah.
Anything else? All right. I believe we have, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Yeah, you bet. Congratulations again.
I believe we do have one comment. Debbie Farr, did you want to comment on agenda item E and F, 7E and F?
Yeah, well, there were a few things that said bond, so I just marked each one that said that.
We're on 7E, so if you'd like to come up now and speak, that'd be great.
So she doesn't want to wait till after the arc. You don't want to wait till
I could.
It's up to you.
Sure. Yeah, I can wait.
Okay, perfect.
It's a different item.
It's still related to the bonds, right?
Mm-hmm.
I thought Channel did.
No, he was under superintendent's report.
He was giving a short bit on the flood damage report, but we got all right. Mr. Hamilton, we're to you. Item 7F, bond architect update. Mr. Chad Hamilton, thank you.
Great, thanks for having me here. So I hope I can be as entertaining as my colleague. Go ahead, next slide. I want to explain some of the more technical aspects of how we actually design and get approved and then actually build the improvements we've been talking about for the bond. Probably most of us have experience with, maybe doing our kitchen remodels or building a house if we're really lucky. And as private individuals, we have a lot of leeway in what we can do. We can go talk to our niece and have her design something on the back of a napkin, and we can hand it to our brother-in-law who's a contractor and get it, go down to the building department and get it approved pretty quickly, and then just start building, go out to the bank and get a bank loan, and stuff works pretty smoothly. Things actually work as you can imagine, quite a bit differently with school construction. We're working with public money, we're working with child safety, and some really kind of rigorous processes for review and construction oversight that needs to be followed. So next slide. I'm not going to pretend to know as much as Mr. Isom about bond funding. It's like a mortgage, but as you hear, it's a lot more complicated than that. Let's go. We had such a great presentation. Let's just go skip over that. So one of the things when we get ready for construction, we have to go out to bid. There are a couple of methods of getting a contractor. The most common one is it's called design bid build, and if we use the design bid build method, we're the designer, for example, we put it out to public bid, we solicit any licensed contractor who has the correct kind of license, and then we're required to take the lowest qualified bidder. And that's probably the most common. There is another method, which is maybe more like your home renovation, which is lease-back. And with this method, you do need to work through your district council to set up the correct contract forms. You are able to select a contractor based on qualifications and performance record, and then actually negotiate the price. I put that out there just because it's important to know it exists. I'm not necessarily saying do one or the other. We'll cross that bridge maybe when we see exactly how the projects are working out and what the final estimated costs are. Another important thing just to remember, whichever method of contract procurement we're going to use, you'll be paying prevailing wage. It doesn't mean union contract, but it means essentially equivalent to a union wage is paid to all workers. Next slide. You may have heard us talk about the division of the state architect. I mentioned the DSA in my last short presentation. So rather than the local building department, the state architect actually reviews designs, approves them, and they have to be approved by DSA before you can enter into a contract for construction. And in fact, if you were to enter into a contract for construction and a contractor was foolish enough to do that, they could actually do all the work and be paid nothing because it's against the law to do that. So super important. We'll be assisting you through this process to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen. And you have other consultants, your legal counsel who will be helping. But the role of DSA is super, super important. And then when the project is done.
When you go to DSA, do you go not only with the plans, but do you go also with a contract in hand that's ready to go or not?
No, always before you have a contract in hand.
So you don't even consult a contractor or anything like that before you go to DSA?
No, normally you want to bid, you want to put out drawings full bid that are DSA approved.
Got it.
DSA is super, super rigorous. We're required to show the attachment of anything that weighs more than 50 pounds. And I have amusing stories that I can tell sometimes about some of the negotiations we've had in the back check room about, oh, show me how this is attached, make it bigger, And then once we're done, it's important that the architect is responsible for making sure that the project has all the closeout paperwork submitted to DSA for certification. And that's important for the board's liability and the district's liability long-term. Next slide. DSA divides its oversight into 3 basic areas. Structural safety, which makes sense. We want the schools not to fall down in an earthquake or sweep away in a flood. Fire and life safety. We want to make sure that the fire alarms work, that certain mandated things are actually there to protect kids. And accessibility, which comes under what we frequently talk about as ADA, the other kind of ADA, Americans with Disability Act. And when we do an improvement anywhere, certain things are grandfathered in, like the structure of this room. If we were to build some walls within this room, the structure of it, we need to make sure that it can support the new walls, but we don't necessarily have to upgrade the entire structure. But if we put a new room within this library, we do have to bring this space up to current accessibility standards. That's the law. And in fact, we need to have a path from the point of arrival all the way through the school to wherever we're doing this improvement, and bathrooms that support it, drinking fountains that support it, et cetera, et cetera. And so these kind of mandatory triggers are things that we watch out for you, and we actually design those. When we're designing an addition to the library, we have to design all that stuff too. Next slide. You can imagine that this has an impact on the timeline, where it might be pretty quick to design and build this theoretical kitchen remodel. Definitely, there are a lot more moving pieces in a school design and approval. DSA alone, I think we have a recent project where we're doing maybe $5 million of each heating and ventilation upgrade. I think we submitted our drawings in October. We got comments last week, right? And then it'll take us a couple of weeks to go back to DSA, get those closed out and get approved. So it's not uncommon for a project to take about a year from design, DSA approval, bidding process before we can start construction. Next slide. I think several people have alluded to how does that happen in a school? The summer, 8 weeks long, right? So we may be thinking about breaking these potential projects down into smaller bits. We may be thinking about phasing them so that some parts start in areas of the school when we still have kids in school, but with appropriate safeguards. So obviously kids are safe, so that we get things done. We'll be looking at breaking projects out that could be done without DSA approval. There's a cost threshold, and it changes every year. It's about to change at the end of this month. It's around $120,000. You can't break projects down to make a budget of $120,000. But if there's a concise whole project that is fairly small, you could actually do that without DSA approval. Maintenance upgrades can be done without DSA approval. You can paint the school. You can replace a roof in kind without DSA approval, within limits. There are a few other things you can do without DSA approval. You don't want to do something, you want to make sure that you have that right, because if you do something without DSA approval, it can cause a lot of headaches the next time you want to do something. You may have to go back and justify it. And we're doing that in another district right now. Some bathroom rates they did. We've just finished a project, or we're just almost finished the project at a fairly large middle school where we did many millions of dollars of work while the school was constantly occupied. In that case, we had housing, kids shifted into it, and it took longer, but it got done. Otherwise, we would have had to go over 5 years of summers. So it's something we're used to doing, and contractors who work in schools are pretty used to doing that as well. Next slide. Just as Mr. Isom talked about the kind of fiscal prudence, we want to be very prudent in how we advise you to break down the projects so that we're not biting off more than we can chew, in our cost estimating so that you're not overcommitting, because as we know, the bond is a fixed amount of money. There are districts who have overspent the bonds, and it's not a fun thing. So we want to make sure to keep you, restrained and make sure that we have a real clear path forward to get things done, finish them before we go forward. That the implication of that is we're going to be coming to you to asking for your priorities in terms of what should we do first and what should we do later. And we'll of course give you our opinions, but we'll be looking to you for that as the board. And I think, my last slide, I think I've already talked about. The DSA does have some emergency procedures that we're hoping to take advantage of. And I mentioned that we actually can put relocatable classrooms on in case of a fire or flood, just to relieve that emergency situation and then go back and get permission. And with that, just want to ask if you have any questions. And I have a question. Yeah, great, thanks. Yeah.
Okay, in something like a structural engineer's report, wouldn't you need that done prior to you designing anything? You need to know what, for example, I don't know if the roof needs it, but I do know that we will need it for the seismic.
So if I understand your question correctly,
we should obtain that first.
No, that is part of the design process. So let's say we want to re-roof that building. It would be prudent to do some structural study and get a structural report, but that happens in tandem with design. And that structural engineer would be part of our team normally, because then it's our responsibility to coordinate all these team members. Mm-hmm. Normally we would have architect, structural engineer, electrical engineer, mm-hmm. in addition to power and lighting, designs fire alarm, mechanical engineer. When we say upgrade the toilets, they'll be working out the plumbing or any HVAC things or fire sprinkler changes. So it's, I would say it's more accurate to say it's part of the design process rather than to say everything's going to come to a halt. Mm-hmm. We're going to get a study in isolation and then do design.
Well, I see this costing more money and also not being independent. So I don't know if there is an option, like you said, to put out bids, formal bidding as opposed to the other. I don't know if we're dealing with a general contractor's charge because you're taking this on as opposed to doing it. I'm not saying that it doesn't have to somehow coordinate with one another, but I can see more money being extracted for this service.
Well, we all have to pay the rent, but it's important that it's integrated and coordinated.
Got that. And
you need design drawings to get DSA approval and to bid. You can't do either of those without a design professional's input. And we're licensed by the state and held to a standard to act in the public interest to get you through that process. So there will be a cost, just as there's a cost to sell these bonds. But it's a normal cost. It's not an unusual cost. And I think it creates real value.
But would it be fair to say that there is an ability, by virtue of having it all done together, it actually saves money on the individual? If you were to go out and do individual pieces, it would be more expensive because you're doing all of them separately than to do them all under one shop, right? Yeah.
And not only that, if we were to, let's just say we don't really know what needs to be done at all. You could, I suppose, get a whole bunch of reports, and then someone has to analyze those. We have a lot of, I've been designing schools for 30 plus years. I've done a lot of schools, and my team and my consultants have also. And so we can actually come to a school and say, aha, we have experience, we've seen this before, let's move it in this direction. This is what I think probably it looks like. And we vet that to make sure that it's true as we go forward. Does that make sense?
It does, but
Sorry.
Go ahead.
On the, some contractors will do a design build.
Yeah.
I would assume that's not possible with the bid process, but maybe with a lease back, you could have a contractor who does design included with contract.
Actually, you could do design build. It would be rare that it's done with such small projects. That would be more common. Many of the community colleges, when they have a new, $40 or $60 million building, might put that out as design build. And in that case, the contractor and the architect become a joint venture, a team in some way. And that has its advantages and disadvantages.
And then is it accurate to say that for dealings with DSA, not anybody can just engage them and say, I'm an architect, I can deal with you, right?
They would have a really tough time.
Right. They want people who are specifically licensed for this purpose, right?
Right. Well, there isn't a specific license to work with DSA.
No.
But if you don't have experience working with DSA, it's very, very difficult to get stuff. Great. Do you have any more questions?
This is not going to come across flattering, and
Okay.
There have been some reasons to doubt some of your guesstimates.
Okay.
And that therefore I would like to see the ability to hire somebody who's well receptive, does good jobs, has done schools, a structural engineer, and then come with his findings that's independent from whatever you have estimated.
So let's talk about the estimating. Let's talk about the cost estimating process. So myself, we don't actually do cost estimates. We hire a consulting firm who does nothing but cost estimates. They're actually a nationwide firm. They have, I think they might be headquartered in San Francisco. We've been working with them for 15 years. And they do many things besides school construction, but the team that we work with does a lot of school construction for not just us, but many other archetypes. And I sure to get it that people are surprised by what things might cost. But at the end of the day, our experience has been that they're pretty close on. But the point isn't to the point of all this cost estimating is to protect the district and to protect the money. Because if let's say we're not, the estimates are intended to be very conservative, as Mr. Eisen was pointing out for his estimating. Our intention is to be conservative. If we're wrong, hey, these projects will cost less and you'll be able to do more. But if we're wrong in the other direction, you could get overcommitted, and that's what we really want to protect.
So the evidence, I guess I would say, is that there's a contractor who has done school bond work for decades, came out without even me knowing. I didn't ask him. He looked at the school and he says, your seismic work's been done. And I said, okay, what about upgrades? Would there be anything in the upgrade? And he goes, it appears that all of your seismic work has been done. And so then you had a plumber contractor ask you questions about the bathroom, and he did not feel that you were giving him answers that were, what he expected. And so we're dealing with some doubt here. And I think that having an independent person come to assess, particularly a structural engineer in the area of, and he's done this, there's one person that I'm aware of, and we should probably get 2 or 3 so that we're looking at some comparables. Anyway, that he could come and do a structural engineer report and then with those findings, you can design. I don't see a problem in not coordinating those findings with what you design, and that it wouldn't have to be under you, and then we wouldn't be paying maybe the extra amount that your service would be providing.
Okay, if I can answer, what I would imagine that would entail would be paying a bunch of experts, actually a bunch of money, to do the same thing several times. And the board could certainly choose to do that. What's normal is that you select an architect based on their qualifications, and that architect assembles a team. We don't have an agenda to do seismic renovations of buildings. We're looking at what's here and saying it would be prudent to consider this. And here's what we think it would cost to take care of it. I look at that renovation. It's interesting to me that someone is so convinced that an adequate seismic upgrade has happened, because I can't even find drawings of it. So it's hard for me to understand that someone could be a contractor, could be so emphatic. When I've talked to structural engineers who are puzzled, right, with what we see. But again, my agenda isn't to do a seismic upgrade if it's not required. It looks like it might be required, and so it seemed prudent.
What made you think it needed to be required?
Certain cracks. I see reinforcement of the transverse direction. I don't see reinforcement of the longitudinal direction.
Okay.
I see weak exterior shear planes in the longitudinal direction. And we're dealing with a structure from 1920.
Years old.
Yeah, and a very heavy roof, right? So again, these are opinions. When we were on site, whatever that Saturday was, the plumbing contractor was, kind of challenging our estimating process and how could we estimate if we hadn't designed it. And I get where he's coming from. He's an expert at estimating drawings after it's been designed. But someone has to make estimates before it's designed. And we do that. They're not all grant. They're not, they're part of the process. They're working their way to being more accurate. It's a starting point, but you as board members need that starting point. You shouldn't start on a path, spend all this money, get everything designed to the nth degree, and then realize, wow, this is more than we can afford. So somebody has to do that kind of early estimate. And that's why we hire an expert to do that. Right? We're not saying it's the last word, and there will be a process of design and iterative cost estimating to bring to you for approval.
Is it accurate to say that the cost estimating that was done upfront, typically the costs come down then in actuality, or is it about the same, or tends to be the pattern?
It's hard to say. If everything that we thought we saw pans out, it'll be pretty close. If we find things that if we uncover things that weren't aware of, the costs will go up and we'll have to shuffle money.
Like the mold that we just found in the room that we weren't even looking for.
Exactly.
That was a room we didn't think was a problem. And then we opened up the wall and there's a bunch of mold.
But it's a starting point, and you need a starting point. And that's the point of this level of cost estimate. It's common for school districts to get kind of broad-based assessments and then move forward. And with each design phase, I didn't really mention at all how the phases that architects work through. Assessment phase is an important one. It's very early. Then there's something we call schematic design, where we really block out all the scope, but not in intense detail, but we show all the scope and we have an estimate. So we check with you, yeah, this design, we're still on budget. But then we go through construction documents, and usually we would do a midpoint of construction document. This is where we get all the technical work, kind of figured out. And if it goes up, ooh, we're high. We need to maybe take out some scope or cut back, and then finish the job. And these are all checks and balances in order, again, to protect the district from cost of living. That's our goal. Our goal isn't, that's our only goal. Design good schools, design good buildings, work with school boards, and protect. That's all we do.
And you've done it for 30 years.
And I've done it for 30 years.
Yes.
I appreciate your time and explain on this, because this board, Chad did all this with our previous board, and he was selected and vetted, and we visited the site that he had worked on. It was beautiful over in Burlingame. And so that all happened with our previous board. And so Linda, I appreciate your questions too, though, because you guys weren't here for that. I feel like you guys are coming in at the end of the conversation or middle of the conversation. So I just appreciate everybody having that conversation, because yeah, it's a new board.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate your expertise, explaining it, making it easier to understand for a group that doesn't go through this.
Right.
So thank you. We really appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Well, yeah, appreciate your time.
Thank you, John.
Yes, Ms. Fry, if you'd like to come up.
Thank you. I have some scribbles here. I guess I have some questions, and I could follow up and send them in writing, because sometimes it's hard to answer right away. But I guess I'm trying to understand who tells the architect what to design and what's needed. And I was wondering, wouldn't there be a steering committee, even if it's a steering committee of volunteers that have a lot of experience in construction, et cetera, that would work with the architect to try to determine what is needed? So that's one question. And that would include inspections, whether it be volunteer or hiring somebody, just to kind of follow through on what Linda mentioned. Also, I did want to follow up again and remind that the bond company and the board, et cetera, had said we're only going to borrow the money that's needed, the amount that's needed, and we might not borrow all the money. So I think it's prudent not to automatically assume it'll all be borrowed. My big concern, the thing that bothers me, is that probably 2/3 of that money that is going to be spent will go straight to interest. The school would probably only get around 1/3 of the money that will be spent. So that bugs me. It's kind of like taking out a loan or getting a mortgage, et cetera. So that's what I'm concerned about, the interest part of the expense. And so I'd like to get a reminder on that. And then also I'm concerned about that other revenue sources would be diligently pursued, perhaps by that steering committee. Neil had put out a great list of all kinds of potential revenue as far as damage. Perhaps there's insurance. So I hate for this loan to be put on the front burner and all the other potential sources to sort of dry up, and to various, whether it be the quarries or the county or whatever, say, oh, you don't need that anymore. So that's a concern I'd like to see pursued. And then my other question would be, if we borrow the money too soon, well before it's needed and well before we can start paying it back, what's that interest accrual cost for that year where we can't start paying it back yet? And when will the oversight committee be chosen? And are you putting out an application? So that's all my questions. If you want to try to, could you address any of those? Or is it going to put?
Sure. Thank you very much for your questions and comments. Let's see, one of yours was about application and the bond oversight committee. We're going to be talking about the bond oversight committee on item 9C. That's something that's real clear, stipulated 60 days. We need to make an effort to get those people in place. We'll put out a fairly simple application and we'll go over those and try to get those 7 members. So Yes.
Less than 60 days. 60 days.
All right. Item 7G, technology report.
Nothing to report out much to the board. I'm happy to report that our server and network performed beautifully with the storm happening. There was minimum touching that needed to be done. Our network was up and running. Phones are running, and a lot of these upgrades happened during the pandemic. With this kind of foresight, and we're just happy this wouldn't have happened. We would have more headache with the older setup. So that's pretty much it. We're getting ready for testing season that's coming up, GATE and CASP, and working on those state reports. So that's pretty much it on my end.
Interim tests are coming up in February for CASP. So yeah, they're gearing up for that.
Yep. Thank you. All right, 7H, our great community club report.
I don't have too much this month. Mrs. Bonds already spoke about in December having the Sunol Glen Give Back program, and she described it very well with families contributing to the 2 adopted families that we had, donating socks and clothing, towels, food items, all being wrapped. And they don't wrap this one big box. They wrap every little individual item. So a family would get, 3 pairs of socks, and each pair of socks is wrapped. So the kids get to wrap a lot of items, and our students. And then when we pass the gifts on to the families, they get to unwrap all these gifts. Those were delivered on the 23rd of December by Renee and Kay, and the families were so appreciative of the donations and the generosity of our school community. We had a tough time coming back from winter break because of the flood, but we were fortunate to set up the GoFundMe account, and Ms. Bonds already reported that without the secondary goal of 15,000, that we're already over that. So our community, and not only just Sunol or even just our surrounding community, friends and families from afar have donated. And so we're truly appreciative of everybody's generosity. I have spoken to Mrs. Mitchell about her art room and her supplies. So all the money that we collect is going to go to the school to be spent on those. And also spoke to Ms. Kirsten about the Eagles Nest program and all the things that she now has to replace that were damaged. We have already started, some of our families have donated a few items initially to the kids when they came back from Eagles Nest to school. They can't go in that room anymore, and their books, their toys, all gone. So we've had a few families generously donate items that they can use in the interim until she can evaluate the whole room and start ordering. Well, I guess once she knows where she's going to land up at.
Right, working on that.
Right. But let me see. Other than that, we're going to assist the school with Kindness Week. And then I had mentioned last time about our spring fling in March. We should be announcing those tickets pretty soon. So hopefully you can make March 18th for our spring fling. And that's all I have.
Perfect. Thank you. We appreciate your support and helping our school. Couldn't do it without the community and parents. Item 8, community comments from the community. And we do have Mr. Chris Boberts who would like to speak on this item. Looks like he left. Oh,
he
man.
said I could take his spot.
Oh, no.
Trisha.
I'm throwing like a no.
Perfect. All right. Item 9A, report, discussion, and possible action regarding the acceptance and approval of the Sunol Glen Unified School District's audit report. Exciting read. I recommend it late at night if you're having trouble sleeping. Any discussion?
Yep.
All right. A motion to approve.
Second.
Right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Any opposed? 9B, report, discussion, and possible action item to approve resolution number 22, 2023-14, certifying to the Board of Supervisors of Alameda County all proceedings in the November 8, 2022 general obligation bond election. Would you like me to read that? Or yes? Okay.
Sorry.
Whereas on June 14th, 2022, the governing board of the Sunol Glen Unified School District of Alameda County, State of California, adopted its resolution number 21/2022-22, ordering an election for general obligation bonds to be held on November 8th, 2022. And whereas the resolution was duly delivered to the registrar of voters for the county, and whereas the resolution was duly delivered to the clerk of the Board of Supervisors of the county, and whereas notice of the board election was duly given, and whereas on November 8th, 2022, the bond election was duly held and conducted for the purpose of voting on a measure providing for issuance of bonds of the district in the amount of $10,900,000 and known as Measure J. And whereas the governing board of the district has received the canvass and statement of results of the bond election from the county, and whereas it appears from the certificate of election results that more than 55% of the votes cast on the bond measure were in favor of issuing the aforementioned bonds, now therefore the governing board of the Sunol Glen Unified School District does hereby find, determine, and certify as follows. Section 1. Entry upon minutes. That entry be made upon the minutes of this meeting of the governing boards that the bond measure has been approved by more than 55% of the votes cast at the bond election. Section 2, certification to county board that it is hereby certified to the Board of Supervisors of Alameda County that all proceedings of the district in connection with the November 8th, 2022 bond election have been accomplished according to law. Section 3, delivery of this resolution, that the clerk of the board is hereby requested to deliver a copy of this resolution to the Alameda County Superintendent of Schools with a request that pursuant to Education Code Section 15274, the Alameda County Superintendent of Schools deliver a copy of this resolution and certificate of election results attached hereto as Exhibit A to the clerk of the Board of Supervisors of Alameda County. Section 4, effective date. This resolution shall take effect on and after its adoption. Passed and adopted on January 10th, 2023 by the following vote. Any discussion? Yep. All right, and motion to approve. Second. All approved, so say aye. Aye. All right, thank you. Item 9C, report, discussion, and possible action to approve resolution number 22/2023-15, adopting bylaws governing Measure J Citizens Oversight Committee. Now, I hope you don't want me to read all the bylaws, but we'll read the resolution here. Again, read that in the evening if you'd like. Whereas Sunol Glen Unified School District of Alameda County, California was successful at the election conducted on November 8th, 2022 in obtaining authorization from at least 55% of district voters to issue up to $10,900,000 aggregate principal amount of general obligation bonds for the purpose of financing the specific types of school facilities projects set forth in Measure J. And whereas the election was conducted under the provisions of Proposition 39, known as the Smaller Classes, Safer Schools and Financial Accountability Act, approved by California voters on November 7th, 2000. And whereas pursuant to the provisions of Proposition 39, Measure J, and specifically Section 15278 of the Education Code, the governing board of the district is obligated to establish a Citizens Oversight Committee to meet, review, and report on expenditures of Measure J bond proceeds, all in accordance with state law. And whereas on the date hereof, the governing board has adopted a resolution formally confirming the successful results of the election and entering said results in its minutes. Whereas pursuant to its obligations pursuant to state law and Measure J, the governing board desires to formally establish the Oversight Committee and adopt bylaws which will govern the administration thereof. Now, therefore, the governing board, the Sunol Glen Unified School District, does hereby find determine, and certify as follows. Section 1 recitals. The foregoing recitals are true and correct. Section 2, establishment of committee bylaws approved. The Oversight Committee is hereby established and shall be governed and administered pursuant to the requirements of state law and Measure J. The bylaws in the form on file with the superintendent are hereby approved and adopted. Section 3, membership as provided under state law Measure J and the bylaws, membership of the Oversight Committee shall consist of at least 7 members comprised as set forth in Education Code Section 15282. The governing board hereby directs the superintendent to commence the notice and recruitment process and to make recommendations to the board regarding initial appointments within 60 days of the date hereof. Section 4, effective date. This resolution shall take effect on and after its adoption. Passed and adopted on January 10th, 2023 by the following vote.
Okay, before we vote on it, there are some issues on the bylaws that I would like to have a board oversight committee. They have people that are specialized in this, and they even have lawyers that we have access to. And there's some wording that I have a little problem with. Okay, I'm going to read one specific thing. Duties of the board superintendent / superintendent. The district board retains all decision-making authority with respect to the bonds and projects to be financed with the bonds. Either the board or the superintendent, as the board shall determine, shall have the following powers reserved to it, and the committee shall have no jurisdiction over the following types of activities. Okay, so this would say either the board or the superintendent can approve contracts, can approve change orders, expenditure of bond funds. And see, I think that this should be a board function and not put or the superintendent. I really feel we need to have 3 people making that decision and not letting one person. There are a couple of other little wordy spots. I mean, these are big issues here. Handling of all legal matters. Approval of project prioritization. I'm sorry, I'm not saying it right. Project plans and schedules, approval of all deferred maintenance plans, approval of the sale of bonds. These should be things that the board does and not put or the superintendent principal. So I have a little problem with that.
I'm sorry, you're reading it wrong. It doesn't, this is not dictation of what the superintendent or the board has authority to do. It has to do with what the committee is not allowed to do. That's all it talks about.
Well, it says either the board or the superintendent shall determine
it's
these
about
powers.
The committee. It's about what the committee
I
can and can't do, not what
the
board or what the superintendent does.
These bylaws don't govern us.
Yes, they don't govern us.
Okay, so you're saying all it is saying is that the board oversight committee has no jurisdiction over these.
Correct.
Things. Okay, I just read or the superintendent, either the board or the superintendent shall have the following powers reserved to it.
That's right.
Yes, and I'm glad that we can have the superintendent do some of these, because if we meet only once a month,
right,
we will really slow some of these down if we can't.
We
don't handle
the
legal
control
matters
over most of these.
No, that's not true. The superintendent is the administrator and runs the school. She is in charge of doing that. The board has oversight authority. It does not go through and decide how
the expenditure of bond funds. The expenditure of bond funds. We should be deciding that. The approval of contracts. We should be deciding that.
We do.
Well, right now it reads or the superintendent.
This doesn't bind us, and it doesn't bind her. It only binds and relates to the committee, the oversight committee. That's all it talks about.
I'm not reading it the same, and I.
But it's the bylaws for the committee.
It's the bylaws for the oversight committee.
It's not the bylaws for anybody else.
Okay.
So it wouldn't even make sense for it to be the bylaws for the committee that then said something that you guys had to follow.
And it wouldn't be binding on us anyway, because it's not applicable to us.
Okay, I just, there were a few other little things too, and I just wanted the extra month to have a bond oversight committee consultant look at this. It's no charge.
We can still do that.
We can do that
even if we pass it. We can have someone look at it and we can change it. There's
we can
nothing.
Change it even if we pass this.
Sure, it's always. This is not written in stone.
We won't even have a committee for 60 days.
I understand that. Okay, then I just,
But by all means, if you have someone at that organization that will look at it for free, send it to them.
CBOC, I'm now a member. So, and I have free stuff for us to take. The community, as well as us and the oversight committee that is chosen, has two free things: bond oversight training and obligation fund and finance video that was done with Contra Costa County. It really probably is something we should have watched before all of this, but anyway, it's very informative and it's free.
Great. Perhaps.
So I have that if anybody wants.
Thank you. All right.
So I want to vote on this.
I motion to pass and adopt these bylaws and this resolution.
Second.
All right, all approved?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Item 9D, let's see, sorry. Quick question, Nikki. If Ms. Ferrari filled this out and also wrote agenda item C about the bond, can she speak more than once? Yeah. Would you like to take 3 minutes to speak on this agenda item?
I guess, you know, I touched on I guess I'd like to know what is, I think you said what isn't the job of the.
You can come up here to speak.
Okay. So I guess I had some questions that weren't addressed. So I guess I'd like to know, can I send you those questions and get answers for those, the things that I already did ask?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So because I still have all those questions. And then I guess I heard you guys saying something about what the bond oversight committee won't be doing. So I guess my question would be exactly what can and will the oversight committee do?
So that's set forth in the bylaws as to what specifically it can and can't do. It has a specific mandate as to what it can do, what it is to do. And for example, it's create a report once a year. It also sets out in the provision that Linda was focusing on is as a provision that sets forth what it cannot do, what it doesn't have authority with respect to.
Right, that part I heard. I was just trying to see what can they do. Yeah.
Right. So if you read the bylaws themselves, it sets all that out.
What they can do. Okay. Because I do have that question still, and I'll send it over to you about a steering committee. Because the oversight is an after the fact.
Yeah.
There's no connection.
Yeah, right. So I do have that question about the idea of a volunteer steering committee.
Here's what they can.
We definitely welcome volunteers. We welcome, as a lot of people in the community said, they wanted to raise funds outside of the bond. We welcome that. That would be great.
Well, some of those funds are an official process. If you looked at some of the things Neil said, you have to make applications and stuff for that. You know, it's a formal application request, and he had some good ones. Did you guys get a chance to see that, or?
No, but I have.
You're talking about Neil Davies?
Yeah. He came up with some stuff, and those are official things that have to be submitted.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, agenda item 9D, report, discussion, and possible action to approve resolution 2023-16 regarding emergency repairs.
You want to read it?
No, I can do it.
Share the reading.
I won't fall asleep this way. So
go.
Whereas recent storms in the district have brought destruction throughout the surrounding areas, including flooding, toppled trees, lost power, landslides, mud flows, and heavy winds. Whereas as a result of the storms, the Sunol Glen Unified School District sustained significant damages to its facilities. Whereas the damage at such district facilities included, but was not limited to, portable classrooms being pushed off their foundations, flooded facilities, fallen trees and debris on school grounds, and damage to fencing, garden, athletic track, and playground equipment. Whereas given the extensive nature of the damages, the district has an immediate need to perform repairs at its facilities. Whereas repairs are necessary and required to further prevent and mitigate health and safety risks at district facilities, to prevent additional damage to facilities, and to prevent and mitigate the potential loss or impairment of public education. Whereas California Public Contract Code sections 22035 and 22050 provide that in the case of an emergency, a district that has adopted CUP-CCAA may, pursuant to a 4/5 vote of its governing body, delegate to its superintendent the ability to repair or replace a public facility, take any directed, related, and immediate action required by that emergency, and procure the necessary equipment, services, and supplies for those purposes without giving notice for bids to let contracts. Whereas the district adopted CUP-CCAA on June 13, 2017, and is thus permitted to utilize the emergency exception to the public bidding requirement that is codified in Public Contract Code section 22035 and 22050, subject to the limitations and requirements therein. Whereas the circumstances necessitating repair of the school facilities resulting from the flooding constitute an emergency under the definition set forth in Public Contract Code section 1102, because such circumstances are a sudden, unexpected occurrence that pose a clear and imminent danger requiring immediate action to prevent or mitigate the loss of impairment of life, health, property, or essential public services. Whereas on January 4th, 2023, the governor of California proclaimed a state of emergency due to severe storms that have affected the district. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Trustees of the Sunol Glen Unified School District as follows. 1, that the district wishes to repair the damages caused by the storms to prevent and mitigate health and safety risks at district facilities, and to prevent and mitigate the potential loss or impairment of public education and essential public service. The circumstances make it so that competitive bidding would be unavailing, undesirable, and impractical, and if done, could lead to extended school closures, additional damages to the facilities, and additional safety risks for staff and students. That the board delegates to the superintendent or designee thereof the authority to enter into such contracts as necessary to procure the necessary equipment, services, and supplies to repair, protect, and address damage to the district's facilities. The foregoing resolution was duly and regularly adopted by at least 4/5 vote of the Board of Trustees, Sunol Glen Unified School District, a regular board meeting held on 10th of January 2023 by the following vote.
Just to clarify, I did ask the attorney about the 4/5 because most boards are there's statutory language that says, or unless there's a 3-person board, then 2/3 is 4/5.
Okay.
So that's why it's funky for us because it says 4/5. But I just wanted to reassure you I got
All right, I second the motion. And all approve?
Yep.
Aye. All right. I certify the above is true. Resolution passed and adopted by Board of Trustees, Sunol Glen Unified School District at meeting held on January 10th, 2023. Great. What was that?
You can take consent items
all together. Great. All right, we have a few consent items. 10A, approval of minutes, December 13, 2022, annual organization meetings minutes. 10A2, December 13, 2022, regular school board meeting, closed session, public hearing minutes. 10B, approval of warrants, warrants dated 12/20/2022. Warrant 514-10839 through 514-10866, totaling $43,357.18. 10C, approval of personnel document, January 2023. 10D, approval of the second quarter 22-23 Williams Uniform Complaint Procedures Report. 10E, approval of the 21-22 Sunol Glen School Accountability Report Card. Motion to approve.
Second.
And all approved?
Approved.
Aye. Okay. Agenda item 11, our calendar, upcoming items, January 24th. We have a board workshop 4 to 6.
So I have some people that would like to attend this. I asked Neil just because I had bumped into him if he thought that other people from the community could attend this budget workshop, and he says it's taxpayer paid for. I think yes. So I'm just bringing that up now.
Yeah.
It's fine.
It's a board workshop, so yeah.
So other people from the community could also attend if they wanted to. Okay, good.
With the same rules of public speaking.
Well, it's your workshop, so they would just be more observing. There's no presentations. Yeah. It's like you guys are learning something.
All right.
But they want to watch you learn.
Watch us learn. Wow, that sounds exciting.
So it's like an audit.
But they're not expected to There's no question and answer.
No, because there's no.
February 7th is our next board meeting is February 7th, March 14th, and April 4th. And there's others after that. 12, closing comments. Any closing comments?
Okay, so I would like to actually one sort of a question thing. I have this, and Mr. Hamilton, actually, I wanted to ask you, I see on this thing here that was dated April 22nd, or 2022. And it has posed just some questions. It's confusing. So I wanted to, because in the thing, when we walked through the school, there's a red line through this specific thing, but it was signed, I guess, by Molly and May. And it says to prepare as part of your project scope, to prepare a conceptual plan and three-dimensional drawing for a building to replace and expand the existing multi-purpose building.
May I see that?
Okay. And so just a question that arose as I was looking through these things. When we did the walkthrough, it was clear, and at some point, Mr. Picardo, you had said there will be no new construction, right? The multi-purpose room is going to be updated and modernized, I think, but there wasn't.
Yeah, so we went out for the first bond. That group of folks, that building is 1950, I think, and the ceilings are falling out, and there's no place for our students to play or have recess or PE during inclement weather, whether that's smoke days, heat days, rainy days. There's no place. The auditorium does not work because it's a historic building with beautiful 1935 chandeliers. You can't play basketball in there. The cafeteria, it's the opposite of the problem. It's really low ceiling and there's not enough space to really do much of anything in there. And we do dance. We do some dance in there, some crab talk, where the kids are sitting on the ground. But it's a really not manageable space for what the program entails. So at that time, the idea was to make a multi-purpose room. But the feedback that we got after that was that people didn't want that. And so, but that room needs major redo, modernization, whatever.
Okay, I just was a little confused with that. And the only other thing that I want to add to is the request that on the next agenda, we discuss the structural engineer report.
What structural engineer report?
We need to be ordering one. And I don't know, and it needs to be soon because people are concerned about their children or grandchildren attending class in that building. You've raised the question as to whether this building is any longer safe. And just like we've seen this storm come through, we could have an earthquake anytime. And having said that, I worked at Santa Clara Valley Medical Center. They pushed like crazy to get the Sobrato Pavilion done because they were concerned that the signs looked like we may be looking at a good size earthquake at any time soon. And to protect ourselves legally, as well as morally for the kids, we need to be pushing forward on this structural engineer report. So I want to be able to talk about that and maybe even vote on that the next board meeting. It didn't become an agenda item this month, even after I mentioned it last month and put it in writing. So I'm asking that we put it on the next board.
Yeah, you would need your colleagues to.
So you want to go out and hire an independent structural engineer separate from our architect and the team that they work with to do what? To assess what structural inadequacies we have now?
Right, for seismic, right. If we need to do any upgrades to what we have.
So you want to, just so we're clear, you want to have an additional expense specifically just for this now? It doesn't have
to be additional. It could be now, and then they would bring their report to be used for the architectural designs if we need to do that. And I'm assuming they will need to do that. At the same time, they could be looking at the roof, doing the whole. There are people that specifically do this for schools.
If we can't vote on it today, but if you want to add it to the next agenda,
I'm trying to do that. I've been trying to do that for a month and a half.
Sure, we can vote.
Well, there's a process, Linda. So we're wanting
to. Well, I asked Neil about that, you know, and he said that
Neil's not on the board.
I know, but he's been here, and he says as part of the Brown Act, you don't need what I've been told you need is the voting of 2 people. And I've been on a board, I've been on 2 different boards, and 2 different boards.
School boards.
Not school boards, no.
Government boards.
They deal with Brown Act just like you do, yes. So in Santa Clara County and under Alameda County, I worked with the Maternal, Child, and Adolescent Health Committee. And anyway, board. And we didn't have this issue of having to vote a majority to put it on the next agenda. You had to let them know more than 72 hours in advance that you wanted something on the agenda. But anyway,
let's add it to the agenda.
Okay.
And you can do whatever research you'd like on what a structural engineer
would cost,
what they would do, maybe get some bids, and we can then discuss it at that time.
Okay.
So yeah, let's go ahead and add that to the next agenda. Is that all right, Pinky? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any other closing comments?
I know that there's a lot going on, and the bond was, you know, there was a celebratory feeling about passing the bond and care for our beautiful building. And that's where our focus was. However, the flood was not expected. And so the energies of the staff and all of us are really in trying to focus on flood mitigation and flood repair and flood recovery. And there's a short term, as you saw, we're looking to see some portables, temporary portables that can be put out in the parking lot. And then there's going to be some long term. And so that has to be where our energies are. There is some bond crossover because the back portables were on the list for the bond project to be not demolished. We were hoping to be able to salvage them and do upgrades. Now this is where we are, so there will be some crossover, but I just wanted to, you know, really express my appreciation to the board for understanding that the staff's attention is on the flood. We have to get our school back in place, so thank you.
Special thank you to Mr. Hamilton, Mr. Isom, who left already. Thank you for spending your time here this evening to give us that information. We appreciate that. Thank you to all of you who have attended and are giving your support and care to our school and our district. Thank you for the staff for your late evening. And I'm glad we had our 100-year flood, so we won't have one for 100 years. Because otherwise it would cross that up. Yeah, otherwise it'd be like a 50 or 25-year flood. So thank you very much, everyone, and we'll go ahead and adjourn. I don't